sea bass on the top. Can I have my filet mignon medium rare, please? Thank you. Waiting on my house salad, Abby. Can you hear me? Is it okay?
Sure. Hello. Can you hear me?
Do you feel comfortable?
I feel very comfortable.
Everything's fine.
Yeah. Can you see my legs?
I think when you open any restaurant, you really leave a part of your soul in the place. And this project took a big chunk out of me. I love this room. This is my, this is the room where I dump all of my ideas and little inspirations. It's like a cabinet of curiosities. It's just stuff that is, I don't know, for some reason it's stuck with me and it's inspired me and it helps me in all the concepts that I create and all of the, and really it's fed a lot of the, informed a lot of the decisions that I made for the Maine. I'm very excited to talk about the brand and my inspiration for the brand. It really was something that was inspired by my childhood. We used to vacation as kids, because I'm from Montreal. We used to vacation in Maine and Vermont, and it was just, I think that nobody's really done that whole area justice. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the U.S. All these things on the walls are like, you know, one of the most famous oyster houses in Boston, really America's oldest restaurant. Dominion from Montreal is an amazing concept. Of course, the Oyster House in Grand Central Station was like my must-go-to place every time I was in New York, in Manhattan. This is actually a concept that I worked on in Beirut in the past, which was on this bay redevelopment called Zaytoune. And it really, in many ways, I mean, St. Elmo's is really a precursor to the Maine. I mean, it has very much the same spirit. It was also a New England inspired concept. So I think the Maine really is kind of it was like an amalgamation of all of these different ideas and all these different concepts kind of honed in and perfected and but it didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, I definitely had a lot of trial and error, I'll tell you that much. It was apparent to me early on that the original MAINE that we opened in JBR back in 2015 in a hotel garage, really at the end of Dubai, resonated so much with people and had such a universal appeal, and it had legs. And in the business, it means that it's transportable. It's something that you can have in different cities around the world. We knew early on that London was the obvious choice for our first international outpost. It's English speaking. I used to live here. I started my career here in hospitality back in 2000, working as a waiter in Soho House. Always dreamt of opening a restaurant in London, if I'm honest about it. And the MAINE felt to me like it was the obvious brand that was missing in a city like London.
Joey approached me about doing some strategy work. We were really looking at how the concept would change for the London market. We did focus groups, which were great. I actually hand recruited the people because we wanted a really specific type of people who go to the competitive set, and those sorts of people aren't on all these research databases. So I had someone like hang around the restaurants and invite people. So that was a bit creepy, but worked really well. We were looking at it from the pricing perspective, the food offering, from the design style. And so we had this group of people who just love food and love restaurants and love that kind of brasserie style restaurant as well. We looked at all the different menus. Comp sets, we profiled different neighborhoods. We did focus groups. I had to eat at, I don't know, half a dozen restaurants that were kind of in our category. And in a way, the real question that we needed to answer was, does London need a MAINE?
When I was introduced to Joey, we wanted to create a property strategy, so we didn't go directly into searching for venue to strike terms on. We looked at London holistically and worked alongside Flo to get a strategy in terms of finding out what made the MAINE tick. I knew that there was no way that we were going to come to a city like London and invest all this money without doing our homework. I mean, I needed to really be sure that the concept translated, that it had its place, and then obviously, what kind of location we were looking for. Once we created that profile, we kind of narrowed it down into certain districts, Mayfair, Soho, the city. That's when we started to get into kind of the smaller detail of individual sites and landlords. I would say in 2018, we spent, like I said, a good year. We must have seen probably 24 locations easily. I must have met every single landlord in the city. It was really like a dog and pony show. I was going out explaining the MAINE to everyone. Charlie and I were looking for something that was really very much like the locations that we have in Dubai. I made his life so miserable because we couldn't find it. It's an impossible thing to find. Unfortunately for me, I'm quite boring and I have to try and show him what's available, and it's not always easy to find heritage buildings that have the efficiency of big open space.
I've never worked with anybody like Joey before, honestly. I've thought about this a lot over the past 12 months. I have never worked with anybody like Joey. He is a complete obsessive about detail, which I love, but complete. For a client, it's out of control. I've never seen something like this. He's also very passionate, but it can lead to what I call circular conversations. We can go around and around and around the houses, which at times you just want to smack your head on the wall and say, Joey, listen to us. This exhaustive, insane document that we created, the 600-page document, pointed towards the idea that the MAINE would do really well in the city. We looked at the city, but specifically Liverpool Street, and that was the one we made the most progress with prior to this Mayfair kind of change in direction. You have to understand, at that point in Dubai, all the MAINEs are kind of one-story, one-floor rooms where the bar and the kitchen face each other. And for me, a brasserie is all about creating that energy and that kind of that comes from a room that's buzzing and boisterous.
I met Joey, and I'd always remember it because we were going to meet in the office, but then Joey said, oh, hey, come down and meet me in the pub in Marylebone. And I was like, okay, well, it's like 11:30, but sweet, we'll go and do that. And I think it transpired that Joey was staying in a flat around the corner, or a place around the corner. And he came down in like a tracksuit on there, kind of trying to be a bit suited and booted. And Joey came in an all-in-one grey trackie, and we sat down, had a conversation, asked me a couple of questions, and within half an hour I'd left. And he says, "When do you want to start?" And I said, "Well, let's do it next week." And that was that.
Joey had decided to go for 100 Liverpool Street.
The city felt like the obvious choice because it's the one that's the most similar to our crowd in Dubai. They drink a lot. They're 5-6 day a week business. They are kind of like an after work crowd. Our captive audience, they're there in the city. They're always, they're right within our reach.
It's a changing area, and also it's the gateway to Shoreditch, so you do get a lot of weekend trade that comes in to spill out and have a good time on the weekend.
Well, there's a couple of criteria that I was looking for. Big long bar, high ceilings, lots of natural light, big open plan kitchen. I think that I love food theater, so I definitely, a lot of our restaurants have raw bars, they have grills, everything's visible. There's a lot of visual density.
Tricky.
Joey wanted it all. He's very, very detailed. He always knew what he wanted. He couldn't always translate it the best, but he's good to work with because he's very honest, very open, and very quick with his decisions. Something that was very important was the ambience of the place. So we needed to get a big floor plate of a single level, ideally with good head height, because it didn't necessarily have to be the whole venue, but at least one big room, because something that he educated me on was the sound of the bar and the kitchen on the same floor was integral to him. So we had to try and find venues that had the ability to contain both of them in a single level.
So we first started the process with Joey at a site in the city by Liverpool Street in Broadgate Circus. A very tricky space. It was a new glass contemporary box on a shopping arcade, and we were trying to shoehorn a lot into it. We were trying to get the essence of the main brasserie, the main bar, a private dining space. And it really felt like we were trying to push an aesthetic into a building that didn't want it, which is always a real challenge as a designer.
The first project in Liverpool Street was a much smaller size. So we were originally looking at a 5,000 square foot space. It was split over 2 floors. It was one kitchen. It was one bar. It was very, very simplistic compared to what we're doing now.
We'd made the deal. We were on course to kind of start construction and everything else.
The concept had been signed off, and they'd start physically drawing it, and we'd just gone for our first approval process. 3 months or 2.5 months of actual physical design work. Joey had started that process prior to that, which was getting the lease sorted out, commercial terms with the landlord at British Land. So we're probably 4 or so months into that process, and what we were doing, working with the likes of Brady Williams, we'd already had that stage 2 design signed off.
September 2019 to March 2020, we are just guns blazing, negotiating the lease. I had signed a heads of terms. We invested a shit ton of money on finishing the designs for the MAINE in Liverpool Street. Then March 27th, the world falls off a cliff.
The Prime Minister has announced the most drastic limits to our lives that the UK has ever seen in living memory.
We will be suspending all travel from Europe.
From Italy this evening, it just gets worse. The death toll now worse than China.
What happened in Bondi was unacceptable.
12 years of perfect employment, it all blows up in 24 hours.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
We're asking everyone to work at home if possible, postpone unnecessary travel.
For many, young and old, 2020 will be the toughest year of our lives.
I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't curled up in a ball on my couch for a good 2 months thinking, what the fuck am I going to do with myself?
You're fundamentally, time is your enemy on every possible front. Time is your enemy because you're paying rent, time is your enemy because you're paying labor, time is your enemy because you're dealing fundamentally with the sale of something that is dying, right? Like if you're in the hotel business and the rooms don't get sold, it's bad, but it's not deathly, right? If you don't sell a steak or an expensive piece of lobster, do you know where it goes? In the fucking trash. There's no coming back for that.
Unfortunately, the city was one of the worst hit because it is very much based on a density of office workers.
It was all very uncertain, which is when you're in the middle of trying to start a new restaurant, not the nicest situation to be in.
Changed everything for the city, but equally just for restaurants, hospitality and eating out forever.
The hospitality industry is one of the UK's biggest employers. It employs 3.2 million people and brings in 180 billion to the economy every year. It was one of the worst hit by the pandemic. It was among the first to close, and it's likely to be the last to reopen.
We're an importer and distributor of premium spirits to the UK market. We suddenly had the doors closed on 70% of our business. We were owed about £3 million. We owed a couple of £1 million to our suppliers.
Everything went dark, just total silence. I just basically told London to hold. Everything changed. Everything changed.
When COVID struck, a lot of the hospitality and the leisure industry stopped building. So a lot of clients just turned the tap off. Some carried on going because they believed in the space. And when Joey finally decided that actually footfall in central London, office workers not coming back, weren't going to be suited for his operation.
I always had in my mind that I would come to London and we'd find this heritage property, this gorgeous old building full of so much history.
Joey is a man with amazing opinions, but also sometimes it can veer off course, it can veer in a different direction. I always remember the first time we presented the concept over Zoom actually, he hated it for Liverpool Street, hated it. I mean, he asked for us to leave the Zoom call so we could speak to Harry, the project manager. That's how bad it was.
The good thing about Joey and my relationship, I think, from the Liverpool Street days is that we did stay in touch quite a lot. So we were always speaking every day when we were doing the Liverpool Street project, but throughout COVID, we would check in once a month. We would have a call, or he would give me an update on where he is and what he thinks about my opinion on the market and where would be a good opportunity to potentially put the MAINE.
Charlie came to me and said, you know, would you like to go and see this location in Mayfair? And I think we had seen the location from the outside at one point, but I wasn't even thinking about Mayfair. I mean, Mayfair was completely out of my, mind. Too expensive. That particular location was far too big.
We actually had looked at the Mayfair site originally a long time ago, but it was a lot more expensive, and we just didn't think we would get the funding to do something like that.
We pretty much had all of our ducks in line, and I felt like the only way that I could make a decision was if I came to London. So in October 2020, I came to London. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. This place would be jam-rammed, and there's not anyone but construction workers. This is the city on a Friday night. It's scary. I mean, it's eerie, actually.
Yeah, Joey came back to London at one point and looked around the city. I was also visiting to see, were people still there, what was happening. And it was really dead at the beginning, like completely dead. You'd go, there'd just be like a rat, like there wouldn't be no person in sight. And it was really bleak.
There was nobody in the streets. People hadn't returned to work. And I just didn't understand how that was going to become a viable location in any way. I went back to my partners and tried to convince them of the whole thing, and I mean, you have to understand, this is January 2021. The world is in lockdown. It is not the time to be thinking about investing all this money into a restaurant, especially not in London. Everybody understood that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And I think they don't come every day. And that's it.
Joey just called me and told me he was going for Mayfair. And it was a bit of a slow realization because we'd seen the site so long ago, I couldn't quite remember it. But I was, what was the rent? How big? It's that big? Oh my God. And how much is the capex going to be to kind of, it's a huge space. And how are you going to fund? I had all these questions, but my head was just like, oh, wearing. And my first thought was, once I realised the enormity of the project, was a sort of, fuck, what are we going to do?
It was the site that when we went back to it, it just ticked all the boxes that I think he always wanted. Sometimes it's hard to go straight into something that's perfect. I think Hanover Square was one of the first or second that we saw the first time round.
And I think there's a lot of people who want to be in Mayfair. Like, it's of course, it's like the most expensive location on the Monopoly, but it's definitely got some like prestige attached to it. So also there'd be different people bidding at these mad prices. But now with the pandemic and all this uncertainty, the price had come down. It was suddenly a possibility.
There were 3 other big companies, established companies in London that were pitching for that location. And I was on about a half a dozen calls with the landlord and with the Hong Kong Monetary Fund, who are their finance partners. And I had to convince so many people that we were the right brand for the location. And I spent between October and December basically pitching the brand, pitching the concept, simultaneously doing the designs, and I didn't really even have a deal, and kind of simultaneously negotiating the deal.
What the fuck are you doing building in London in the middle of a pandemic? Like, we were talking about, like, people were buying canned foods and toilet paper, and Joey was building a cabaret. What?
I don't think I really thought that it would happen. But then I was like, fuck. At every step, I'd be like, this thing could actually happen. And then by December, I realized that this thing was going to happen and that it was too good of an opportunity to pass up.
It was a shame we had to walk away from the 100 Liverpool Streets site because I genuinely believe he would have performed very well commercially there. But when we agreed that deal, that site, at the end of 2019, I think the project that Joey had in mind for the Maine was very different to what it has now grown into and what we're all excited about.
I think the brand has evolved from originally Joey tying in this New England heritage. I think he's become more confident over the course of the past 6 years, to the point now that he really knows where he wants the brand to go. And it's no longer playing it safe, maybe, as he did originally, with a sort of the food and the energy kept it as a moment, but maybe the design, which he did amazing to do himself, but was safe. Whereas with the MAINE Mayfair, he has been willing to take chances. He's taking risks.
The building is obviously covered in history. It is a listed building, so we call it a Grade 2 listed building. There is a lot of layers of approvals that one has to go through if you want to move into one of these buildings. So, for example, in our drawing room and in our tavern, anything that's being fixed into the walls or you're painting over or you're covering fireplaces, for example, needs to go through an 8 to 12 week approval process via a third party at Westminster. You have to get a heritage consultant to look at it.
Because it's Grade 2 listed, there was so much we couldn't do and couldn't touch. And we had to come up with so many interesting solutions for the way that we worked with the house.
We love grade listed interiors. Having been built in 1720 and having not had much love and having been restored, we had big issues, like weight loadings even on the ceiling in the front drawing room were low, and we wanted large chandeliers. The floor is original, but we couldn't keep it because it was completely in pieces. So laying a new floor on top, but then also the new floor being weight restricted as well. There's a bar going into the main drawing room, of course. It's beautiful bronze reflective mirror, another weight issue. So there's a lot of those type of issues and constraints we have to deal with. And then on top of that, we're not allowed to touch the wall.
We had to do the designs really fast. We had to almost convince the landlord of the concept. And Shane and I were working on producing kind of a mood board for what we wanted to do with this house. And at one point it kind of hit me that I was thinking about it too literally. What I was trying to do was I was trying to make the MAINE work inside this house, when in actual fact what I needed to do was to just take the DNA of the MAINE and inject it into every room and make every room its own unique experience.
Within the aesthetic of the MAINE, there are some key DNA features. I think distressed brick is a love of Joey's, and it's a real key element of all of the designs. I think the black and steel metal, I think that what's interesting about Joey, he is a man who is beautifully presented and pristine as a human being, and he loves his interiors to be slightly dirty and rough around the edges. So it's the opposite kind of contradiction of each other. So the black and steel, rough timber, we weren't prescriptive on having to keep colours. Lighting was key, but there was huge conversations over crystal chandeliers, palm chandeliers, what type of chandeliers, because it's a restaurant that needs drama. And so we definitely took the idea of the large crystal chandeliers that he had just put into his latest restaurant in Dubai and bring it over here, but we redesigned them so that, again, it was an identity for Mayfair.
I think that everybody who was involved from the design perspective really underestimated how complicated it was. And, you know, you're trying to design something with a designer, and most designers kind of get a lot of parallel trust and they get to play with a blank canvas. And you don't really get that with the MAINE because there's so many preconceived ideas and things that you have to work with.
I think Shane's he's so passionate about what he does, and he's very hardworking. And I think whilst Joey and Shane are quite different people, they completely share that in common. So I thought that either it will be like a great combination or it will be a disaster, but whichever one it is will be apparent from the get-go. So they should meet each other and see if they kind of, you know, sometimes when you put two people together, you're like, you know, it's going to go one of two ways.
Do I think that relationship was a complete success? Absolutely not. No, definitely not. I don't think either of them would say that. Do I think that there are a lot of things that came out of it that were good and worked? Yes. Do I think there's a lot of things that came out of it that did not work and that, you know, really need to be thought out in the context of time and fixed over time? Absolutely.
You need to understand is that I was designing this restaurant with Shane through Zoom, trying to show me fabrics and samples on Zoom, and I was trying to make all these decisions because we were on an accelerated program to open up for Christmas, and it was almost impossible. There was no flights between Dubai and London. There's a lot of things that came out that were starting to be installed in June, July, when I was like, stop.
Either Joey would get to site in the morning or I would get to site early. And the mornings that Joey would get to site before me, he would send me pictures of stuff. And you know, on WhatsApp, you can do kind of these like circles and colors. And I knew that I would wake up by like, you could see how angry he was by how many circles he had done on something. But when we walk into the drawing room, which is this like beautiful, original, aristocratic drawing room, the moldings are originally made from animal fat. It's been open since the 1700s. There's these two original fireplaces and vaulted ceilings. And there's these two mirrors in there. and they were stained with this like red, splotchy murder victim insanity. And he sends me a message and he goes, I think our mirrors have Ebola. And I'm like, it's okay. It's going to be fine. We'll fix it. And the problem is, like, I talk him down from these things, right? Like, I get him to the point where he's calm or we have a plan and everything's fine. And then somebody comes in and goes, oh my God, what are those?
I know he hates them. This won't be on film. The drawing room mirrors were a specification that maybe we both didn't love at the end of the day. You know, with every project, things arrive on site that aren't fully what you thought. And I think that on a project like the MAINE, where there are 200, 300, 400 items arriving on site within 3 weeks, there's going to be a lot of new exciting things, and sometimes there'll be a miss.
We didn't have the luxury of getting samples. I mean, you have to understand, with supply chain issues and COVID and the aggressive timeline, it was impossible to do sampling. We definitely spent a lot of money on changing a few things. I still think we made a huge mistake on the floor. I don't think it was in character with the history of the building. In retrospect, I mean, I think it's fine, it works, but I'm not happy with the staircase. But then again, you know, there's always a point in my projects where I wake up and I hate absolutely everything. And I think that's sort of a natural part of the design process.
The idea of working with designers and, you know, that relationship and managing Joey and Joey's expectations is that, like, there were days where he would ask for ridiculous shit. We were walking through Hyde Park at one point, and it was like just after the rain, and there was a fox, like a wild animal fox, like running through. And he like walks up to the fox and he's looking at the fox. And I swear to God, he turns around to me and he goes, I have an idea. How amazing would it be if we like got that fox and like the fox would like just be in our tavern, like just walking around. I'm like, okay, so you want me to catch that animal and then like get it to like wear like a monocle and sip martinis like as our mascot?
This is a true story. He wanted, one day, he woke up and he said to me, I want people hanging off the ceiling whilst live performances are underway in the brasserie. I want the live singer, and I want trapeze hooks, and I want people hanging off ropes in the ceiling. And I was like, okay, well, we can look at that for you, Joey.
I think nobody has taken New England aesthetic and merged it with club nightlife scene to create something like this, and then throw in English heritage listed.
Yeah, I always say to everyone, we're not just here selling food, we're peddling perception. We're creating an immersive experience. It's very multi-sensory. I mean, we're creating a scent, for fuck's sake.
I first met Joey a few months ago through my amazing assistant, actually, and he'd heard about the work that I'd previously done with other hotels and clubs like the Children's Firehouse and Annabelle's, where I created their signature scent. It was really lovely to see the building before it becomes something fabulous, to see the aesthetics, and when you're creating a fragrance, it's really great to work out the heritage of the building first, to then enable for me to then make it as a story and the concept for the actual finalised formulation that I will then compose. The MAINE Mayfair is going to have a formulation that's going to be composed with different notes and accords that will personify different elements of the story that I get from not only just the building and the style and the designs that I've spoken to Joey about, but also the heritage and the history of the place. It's got that vibe of the turn of the century, using ingredients like frankincense and myrrh and smoked woods, and, you know, some woods that can be, like sandalwood, for example, is quite an oily wood, and cedarwood has that real kind of dryness and old books connotation to it as well. I remember showing Joey Rose de May, which is one of the most expensive roses in the world. It's such a beautiful, beautiful rose. It costs €500,000 a kilo, but when you smell it, it has this, it doesn't even smell like rose. It smells like something from 20 years ago. 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 It smells like something from 20 the Egyptian time. So you could imagine Cleopatra wearing it before she went to go and see Antony. When I'm creating a fragrance, I always want to make sure that I can capture the story of the personality and the character and the design and the style of not only the building, but also all the people that are going to be a part of it as well.
Luck be a lady tonight. Luck if you've ever been a lady to begin with. Luck be a lady tonight. I'm Emma Smith. I'm the musical director here at the MAINE Mayfair.
Hi everybody, welcome to the MAINE. I'll be your host for the rest of your life. Good morning.
When I first met Joey, he was sat in the corner at one of my shows at the MAINE in Business Bay, and is very understated and didn't say much and just watched, you know, with a cocktail and took it all in. And he came up to me backstage and he says, "I don't know why you have a polar bear in your hair, but I love it and I want more."
This Jessica Rabbit kind of character with her corset and her tiny little waist and her big boobs. And she comes out with like a polar bear in her hair. And she's belting out like pinup crooner jazz. And it was just perfect and absurd. And I loved it. And the whole brasserie was very much designed around her. She was like my muse. I felt like she needed the space to perform in. And it was like all designed around this idea that we could have this performance in the middle of an amphitheater style room.
The music program here at the MAINE Mayfair is an ever-growing curation process that is collaborative between myself, the musicians and the artists that I am not just working with, but also very close friends with, and the vision of Joey and the team around the MAINE. It's collaborative also with like the art curation, the wine list curation. It's like a fully immersed experience. So as Joey and I began to speak about the kinds of performers that we want to really populate the program at the MAINE, I was sharing with him some concerts that I've done, some artists that I've worked with that I've found really inspiring. And the one theme that seems to run through everybody that we are bringing into platform at the MAINE is that there is a touch of the old-fashioned and a big helping of rebellion. That's exactly what we're doing musically here at the MAINE. So it will be an ever-changing programme. And I don't want to give so much away, but I think you should be here to check it out for sure.
Not only that the opening party was successful, but that this restaurant was going to be something real, a real player in this city, to make real noise.
It was a pipe dream. I think now it will be a reality, which is still hard to believe.
It's been so hectic, like mental hectic, and it's been so rewarding at the same time.
This is going to be huge. It's not only the scale of it and the location of it, but just the excitement of something international coming in.
London has seen nothing like this, and I don't think it will for a number of years to come.
Things got tough and dark. And Andre always says this really cool line, which is, the only way out is through. And I love that, actually. That's something that he says a lot of shit, but that actually really makes a lot of sense to me.
If Joey didn't have someone, I think, like me, helping him do this, I think he would have gone crazy.
Everyone underestimated the complexity and sheer scale of this project. I think in my mind, it was like a small neighborhood restaurant.
I think my favourite room will be the secret room, just off the toilets, just because I think that is just going to be a mad little place, and when Joey came up with it.
My favourite room, other than that secret room we're not talking about, is going to be the back corner of the Cabaret Brasserie, looking at whatever performance is on stage.
I was imagining that Shane would say he loves the toilets because he loves designing toilets, and all of his toilets in any project he does are beautiful. But then if someone asks you what your favourite space will be and you say the toilet, that sounds, you know, it's a slightly odd response.
My favourite room, you can ask me that. That's kind of an impossible question. I don't know how to answer that. I think every single room has almost a different part of my personality.
Friday night and the lights are low, looking out for a place to go, where they play the right music, getting in the swing. You come to look for a king. Anybody could be that guy. Oh, the night is young and the music high, with a bit of jazz music, everything is fine. You're in the mood for a dance. When you get that chance,